Okay, so today's lesson is all about copyright and Fair Use Act of when you find somebody else's copyrighted work, how you are able to go about using it in a proper way. Our learning objectives, we're going to talk about some key terms today. So copyright, what it is, what public domain is, as well as what fair use is. We're also going to learn about the 4 factors that you can use to evaluate something, whether it falls under fair use or not. And then we'll talk about some real world examples of material being used and whether or not it falls under the Fair Use Act. So we'll start out with some definitions. Your guided notes don't start until 2 more slides, so this is just a general overview right now. But copyright is just a protection that as soon as you create something that is your own creative work, it is automatically protected under copyright, which means people have to get your permission first before they can go about using your creative work. Public domain is people's creative work that isn't copyrighted. So you can use these people's creative work however you choose without first having to get permission. It doesn't mean that you can pass it off as your own creative work. It just means that you can feel free to use the person's creative work without having first to contact them and get their okay. And then fair use is using somebody else's creative work that is copyrighted, but it doesn't require that you get their permission because it falls under those fair use 4 guidelines that we'll learn later on in the presentation. All right. Okay, so this is where your guided notes will begin. 3 things that are able to be copywritten are expression, so like written works of art, people that write books or plays, original work of authorship, and then anything with a small amount of creativity. So some painting or a music video, a photograph, a song, all of those things can be copywritten by the creator. And then work is automatically copywritten once you produce it. There's not any kind of process or like application that you have to file with the government or anything. It's just automatically, once you create it and put it out there and start sharing it, it's automatically copywritten, which means anybody that comes in contact with it has to get your permission before they use it, or it falls under what's called copyright infringement, which we'll discuss in a little bit. As a copyright owner, you have 4 exclusive rights to your work. So these are exclusive rights to you that if people violate it, that's when you can take legal action against them. So only you as the copyright owner are able to make copies of the work and distribute it. Only you can create a derivative work, which means if there's a book, only you can create a sequel to that book or create a movie about that book. Only you can distribute copies to the public, whether you are choosing to charge people for that copy or distributing it as free. And then finally, only you can publicly display or perform the work. For example, if you wrote a play, only you can produce that play in public, or if somebody does want to produce your play, they would have to get permission and you might possibly charge them money to use your play. So for example, Miss Simmons, she has to get permission to use a play, and a lot of the time she has to pay a decent amount of money if it's a well-known play. So I think whenever they did The Wizard of Oz, they had to pay a crazy amount of money just to get permission to perform the play at Mercy. And I think it was in the thousands of dollars, which is crazy. But that's the benefits as a copyright owner, that you have these 4 exclusive rights to that work. And sometimes it can benefit you in terms of financial gain. So as mentioned before, we talked about copyright infringement. Copyright infringement is when you have copyright benefits over a work of art, and it's when somebody violates one of those copyright exclusive rights that you have. So if somebody were to make copies and distribute them or perform the work without getting your permission, any of those 4 exclusive rights, if they're violated, then that's when copyright infringement has occurred. And a lot of the time it can come with legal repercussions, and also a fine or potentially even jail time. And a lot of people think if something creative work doesn't have that copyright symbol on it, then, and that is not the copyright symbol, that is the amper symbol. I'm sorry, I need to change that. The copyright symbol is a C within a circle. And just because something doesn't have a copyright symbol on it, it doesn't mean that it's not copywritten. So it's not a requirement that you have. Yeah, okay, so there is the copyright symbol. Sorry about that. I have a couple well-known copyright infringement cases that I want to go through. So this first picture right here, this is a photographer. So this copyright infringement case was Art Rogers versus Jeff Koons. So Art Rogers is a photographer, and he shot this photo, this black and white photo on the left, and sold it for use in greeting cards and other similar products. And Jeff Koons saw that image and decided to recreate that photograph, but in a statue style. So he created this 3D statue of that photograph. And Art Rogers found out that this statue had been created based off of his photograph, and he felt that it infringed upon his copyright exclusive rights. So he actually sued Jeff Koons, the statue creator, and he had to pay a settlement to Art Rogers for using his photograph as basis for his statue without first getting permission. The next one right here, so this is a photo that was taken by a photographer who worked for the Associated Press whenever President Obama was running for his presidential campaign. And that was then turned into a poster by Shepard Fairey. And it became the image and the face of the Obama campaign and gained a lot of popularity. Well, the photographer for the Associated Press noticed that it was her image, her original photograph, that poster was developed off of. So she actually demanded that Shepard Fairey, the poster creator, compensate Associated Press for the sale of his posters. And they ended up coming to a private settlement, so an undisclosed amount of money, which he had to split the profits that he made from his poster with the Associated Press. The final example here is a high school down in Florida versus Dodge Chrysler. So Lake Mary High School made the decision to ditch their old mascot, which they thought looked like a goat, and they decided to adopt the Dodge Ram logo as their high school mascot logo. And somebody tipped off Dodge Chrysler and let them know that this high school in Florida was using their Dodge Ram logo. And they sent a letter to the Lake Mary High School telling them that they needed to stop using the Chrysler logo immediately because it was trademarked under Dodge Chrysler. And if they didn't stop using it, then they would be sued and have to pay a heavy fine. So those are just a few examples of how copyright infringement has been applied in the real world today. Next, we're going to talk about the 4 factors of fair use. So if you find something that you want to use, you need to make sure that you're using it fairly, and you can kind of think of it as, is it fair and square? So you can think of the 4 factors as developing this square. So we have 4 keywords that you want to keep in mind. So the amount, the purpose, the nature, and the effect. So we'll go into more detail on this slide. So Whenever you're evaluating something, whether or not it falls under fair use, you want to look at the amount that is being used. You want to make sure that it's only a small portion of the original work and does not include like the heart of the work. So if you use too much, then that's where you start falling into that copyright infringement. The second thing is the purpose. Does the purpose of the new work, is it educational, or is the original work, is it transformed into something very different? So maybe you're just using parts of the original work and you're kind of skewing it and making it a new abstract image, but you can tell that it's still similar and related to that original work. Third would be the nature. The nature of the original work is nonfiction, or it's based on facts rather than creative or fictional facts. So you don't want to completely distort the original work, turning it into something that's fictional. And then fourth, effect. So the effect of the new work does not include any negative impact on the creator or the value of their original work. So you don't want to take somebody else's original work and flip it in some way that creates a negative image of the original creator. You want to show them respect in using their creative work, and doing that by making sure that you're maintaining the work's original value. There are four domains where fair use is applied. The first one is for schoolwork and education. The second one is for criticizing or commenting. The third is news reporting, and the fourth is comedy. So you can use others' creative work if it falls into fair use in these four categories. So a lot of my presentations and things are other people's creative work that I've just adapted for the topics that I'm teaching, and I'm not trying to pass it off as my own or anything. But it falls under that fair use because I'm using it for schoolwork. Same whenever you all create videos and things. You might use somebody else's song or images in a video, but because it was used to create some educational project in one of your classes, it falls under fair use in the category of schoolwork and education. Also, like news reporting, news reporters will report on some popular video or new music that's out, and they'll play that work on their newscast without first getting permission. Or a lot of the time, Saturday Night Live uses somebody else's creative work to kind of put on a comedic skit. They don't have to get permission first off because it falls into one of those four acceptable categories for fair use. All right, so if you find something that you want to use, there are 5 rules of thumb that you can use to evaluate it based on fair use. The first one is check to see who owns it. If you can find the owner, move on to step 2 and actually get their permission to use it. If you can't find the owner, I would definitely say step number 3, you make sure that you give credit to that creator. Or don't try to pass it off as though it's your own. Just say, the creator is unknown or anonymous. This is not my original creative work. Fourth, a lot of the time you can purchase the creative work to use it. And I would suggest paying money to use that person's creative work. And then fifth, use it responsibly. Again, making sure that the fair use, so the amount of the work, the purpose of the work, the nature of the work, and the effect of the work are all being respected. Last part of this lecture will be evaluating different examples, so whether or not you think they used each of these examples and it falls under fair use. So the first example, Maya is making a flyer for her pet sitting business to post on her social media account. She finds a cool pet store logo and uses part of it in the flyer. So thinking about this, does this fall into one of those 4 categories? Schoolwork and education, commenting or criticizing, news reporting, or comedy? It doesn't fall into any of those 4 categories. So I would say this would definitely violate fair use and is not considered fair use for Maya to use a portion of that logo, especially because she didn't ask permission first. Let's skip to this one. All right, Eva takes an image of a famous magazine cover of a celebrity model, but she changes the headlines on the cover. She does this to criticize how magazines pressure girls to look perfect. I would say this does fall under fair use because it falls into that category of criticizing and commenting. I don't know as far as her just changing the headlines on the cover. But again, because it does fall in that criticizing and commenting, I think it definitely does fall into fair use. She's not trying to pass it as her own. All right, Darren uses Photoshop to create a new version of the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. He uses this image on his website where he sells other photos he created. I would say this is definitely in violation. He is using an original work. Obviously, he can't get permission, but the Mona Lisa is definitely a copywritten creative work that you have to make sure that you're getting permission and using responsibly. And because it doesn't fall into one of the fair use categories of commenting, comedy, news reporting, or schoolwork and education, this definitely is a violation of the fair use. All right, that is all of the lesson.